What it do? This is the Brothers on Books podcast where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. We're on Instagram at Brothers on Books, and we have a YouTube channel now, so go check us out there. I am Jack Allweil, and with me, as always, is my brother Alex Allweil. Al, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, Jack. How you doing?
I'm getting over a third bout with COVID that kind of wreaked havoc on my Hawaii experience, but it was still great to see everyone. And I was happy we got some sun and a lot of walking in.
Yeah, I guess with that said, I'm a little bummed that I'm done gallivanting around the country and back at work. After being off for nearly 3 weeks, I'm
Dang.
back in the grind, doing that lab work,
What a life.
putting that stuff in beakers and swirling it around and then putting it into another beaker to just do it again.
Very nice.
I guess with that said, Jack, what book are we reading today?
We are reading Stephanie Kelton's The Deficit Myth. This is a book that you picked out, Al, so I'd be curious, and I'm sure the listeners are very curious. How did you pick this book?
Yeah, you could say I came across this book through like a YouTube wormhole kind of. Probably, I don't remember. When did we have our last draft? Like 4 months ago, maybe?
It feels like a while ago. I don't think it was that long ago, but maybe.
Well, whenever it was, as I am now, I was listening to a lot of YouTube debates, and you know, a lot of times when I'm bored at work, when I'm mixing stuff in flasks, sometimes I'll just YouTube shift debate to listen to Peter Schiff debate someone. And in one of his debates, he was debating someone that was a proponent of MMT. And per usual, I thought Schiff, wiped the floor with him. But I was like, what is this theory? And I kind of remembered back to the Katusa book.
Yeah, that was episode 23, Rise of America.
Right, where he talked about how he felt America is going towards MMT. I started YouTubing MMT, and I came across, I guess, this author, Stephanie Kelton, and I guess the guy who's referred to as the founder of MMT, Warren Mosler. And I listened to a lot of them. I listened to a wide variety of speeches by both of them and debates by both of them. And I just figured, sure, let's read it. Okay. I guess going into it, I would say from the YouTube videos I listened to, I disagreed with it as a way the country should be run. But as a quick just as a quick housekeeping agenda, I guess as a background on Stephanie Kelton, I guess, or I should refer to her with the proper respect that her title and degree affords. Dr. Kelton, who is a professor currently at Stony Brook, previously was the chair of economics department for University of Missouri, Kansas City. And she was also the chief economist or the economic advisor to Bernie Sanders in his 2016 campaign. So I guess with that said, let's get into it. I guess really quickly, I'll just read off. I'm on Wikipedia right now. I'll just read off the principles of MMT. I think they give it kind of a good overlay of what MMT or modern monetary theory is. And then I think maybe you would want to give your own definition or how you view it. Okay. So Wikipedia lists out 5 principles. And these are: a government can pay for goods, services, and financial assets without a need to first collect money in the form of taxes or debt issuance in advance of such purchases. So that primarily means that the government first spends, and then it collects the money. So I think the general theory is that the government, one, has to first collect the money, and then once you have the money, you can spend it. MMT says the reverse, that you first spend the money, and then you are tasked with collecting it. Tenet number two would be the government cannot be forced to default on any debt denominated in its own currency. So in America, what it's primarily saying is that since the United States government through the Federal Reserve can generate dollars, it would be impossible for America to default on dollar denominated debt. So unless the people in government decided not to print money, it would be impossible for the United States to default on American dollars, on debt denominated in dollars. If we had debt in, like euros, where we can generate euros at, whenever we want, we could default on those. Tenet three, the government is limited not in money creations, but really only by inflation. And you see that accelerate once the real resources of the economy, which they describe as labor, capital, and natural resources, are being utilized. So the limitation of the government is not dollars, but it is actual real resources. And I would say that when you listen to sort of people attack MMT on the internet, they just say, oh, just print everything. But I will say, Mosler in particular, when he talks on YouTube, he does go through a long time explaining how the real resources of a country are not dollars, but are actual real assets. Stephanie Kelton does too, to an extent. They talk about inflation a lot, but I guess we'll probably talk about it. I feel like they sort of missed the point, though, in some respects. Tenet 4 recommends strengthening automatic stabilizers to control demand pull inflation rather than relying upon discretionary tax charges. And then Tenet 5, bonds are just a monetary policy rather than a funding device. So they're just using bonds to more or less give American citizens or anyone who wants to buy bonds interest, and not as a means to fund the government. So I guess, what was your take on MMT?
From her, I thought she was a very good writer. I thought some of the examples she gives explaining what it is, and I liked her example with Mosler. Is it Mosler? Yeah, Mosler.
Yeah.
And his kids, where he's basically saying, I'll pay you to do chores, through the house in my business cards. And the kids say, well, they at first don't do any of the work, because correctly, I would say, like, why would we want your business cards? They don't do anything for us. No one accepts them. And then Mr. Mosler enforces basically a tax, or like kind of policing the kids, saying, you need to give me at least 10 of my business cards a month to have all the privileges throughout the house. So, and then they start doing the work more. And I guess my thought is, as the citizens of the United States, do we really want to be like kids getting instructed by parents on what we should be doing or what the value of something is? Another thing that stood out to me was the idea that they weren't already thinking like this, because in my mind, when COVID started, I started hearing some of this MMT talk, and I thought a lot of the people in the government already thought like this. Like, they don't really need to raise money to do anything. Like, they can just print it and distribute it how they want and worry about, quote unquote, financing later. She did make it seem like most of the people in the government still thought of the government spending as like a household budget. Like, you need to be bringing in more than what it's paying out, which most people would say, yeah, that's how it should be. So I don't really like the thought of this being used, but I found it interesting to read about, and I thought she did a good job. I felt like every time I had like a question come up, like, well, aren't you worried about like it going more to like one set of people than another? It felt like she immediately responded to that. It almost felt like she was reading my mind on the counter arguments. So from that perspective, I liked the book, just hearing how she would counter some of the concerns people understandably would have. But
Yeah, well,
I thought the book was good, and even if I don't agree with it, I kind of I actually I did enjoy this book.
okay. So I guess why don't you agree with it? Or what in particular don't you agree with?
Well, the idea that, and I think she does talk about, the difference between a currency user versus a currency issuer. And, a lot of the European countries that all went to the euro, they are now currency users as opposed to issuing their own currency. So they have to run their country more of like how we view our household budgets, where money comes in and you can use that pool of money to spend.
More so, less how, like, I think she analogizes states, right? Like
Mhm.
states have their own
Right.
state taxes, but at the
State.
end of the day, they're beholden to the federal government for if they need help, just like a European country would be beholden to the whatever the
Yeah.
ECB.
Yeah. Like the state and local governments have to, have like a normal type of budget. I guess the things, I think it's just kind of like short-sighted. Like it doesn't talk enough about, or it doesn't, I mean, there would clearly be knock-on effects that I feel like aren't really discussed. Like if you just arbitrarily shoot cash into certain parts of the economy. Like, yeah, if they sent me like $1 million, like yeah, like maybe my rentals would get better and the property managers would make more money off of my houses. So like it is doing well, and it might not, I guess, contribute to inflation, across the US, but it's just it comes back to the idea that some central planner knows how to best spend the money or where it should go. I don't agree with that. And also, if it continues, what countries outside of like what people outside of America are going to like trust the system? I feel like it's dangerously close to communism.
So what you just were sort of touching on is the biggest problem I had with it. Uh, which I feel like if we were totally a closed society, right? Like if there was just a government and we didn't have to rely on anyone outside of us for anything, I think this could, I'm not saying I would agree with it, but I think it could potentially work. But what you were just saying, at a certain point, if we just keep generating dollars and essentially using those dollars to buy goods, at, at a certain point, I think other countries won't accept the dollars.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think that's kind of what this whole fight on the fiat system is. I think at the heart of it, kind of what Putin wants to is kind of fighting and pushing back on America for, because we
right.
kind of
Like we,
can, bail
it's,
out and
I feel like the book could aptly be titled, How to Abuse Your Power as the Reserve Currency, uh, more or less. And sort of the other thing I kind of found interesting is that she knocks on Greece all the time for going, first switching to the euro and then going broke in the euro. But they kind of I mean, Moser talks about it too, but they kind of overshadow the fact that Greece flipped to the euro because you know, they had brutalized the drachma so much that no one wanted it. So it was worthless. So then they flipped. I feel
Mhm.
like if you have a long enough time horizon, the same will happen to the dollar, that no one will want it, and then we'll be, stranded with a worthless currency. I was listening to Mosler, and I kid you not, debate someone on YouTube under the name Rage Pope, and yeah, it was a YouTube debate. It was kind of weird, but it was moderated by this guy named Destiny, and he asked Mosler that question, like aren't we then dependent on other countries having faith in the dollar? And he kind, in my opinion, he kind of sidestepped the question. He didn't really ask. He didn't really answer because I was very interested in his opinion on that.
I guess from history, there's been no like fiat money that's really lasted. So if I
Right.
mean it's
I
so pretty.
but everything always, that was the main thing I remember taking away from the Katusha's book, is everything always reverts to a real money, like the bimetallic or a real funded money source. Everything always, it seemed like everything always went back to like metals, just like I think at some point the dollar will as well, when it's been abused so much.
Mhm.
Um,
I
but
did
yeah,
think it was kind of interesting in terms of because it is focused around inflation and just thinking about what injecting cash into a certain part, what that would do to inflation. And I was kind of thinking that yeah, if it was just understood that there would be taxes and borrowing on the back end, I did wonder how that would how because right now the Fed kind of fights it, they try to fight inflation by raising interest rates. So and that also feels kind of forced and arbitrary to some degree. So I don't know. I was kind of going back and forth. Like, okay, they're kind of both like evil, I guess, in my mind, or like not natural forces. Um,
I mean, I guess two quick points. First, to the Fed point, the Fed could allow the interest rates to, instead of just arbitrarily be chosen, they could allow it to be market driven, right?
uh, right, exactly. So and that's why I feel like they're kind of getting into things they should not be.
Right.
But I
I
guess
think
if you got rid of that aspect and then just focused on the MMT kind of control side, I mean, it's kind of like, which evil do you want to get? I don't know. Like,
I think, and this is just for me, I think when you think about taxes as a control for inflation, they become, in my opinion, it just to me makes the government seem like it's way more controlling. It makes like it's trying to totally dictate your life, right? Because it's saying, I'm going to tax this. It's literally saying, do this. I want you to do that through taxes for really no reason. Like if it doesn't have to fund anything, it's just taxing you essentially to control you.
um, well, I think you would be able to. I mean, I think you could say like, okay, like if Congress passes a bill to inject, let's say they inject money to forgive student loans, which she brings up,
She
and
brings that
then
up a lot. Yeah.
after the fact go to tax as a consequence of injecting the money for the student loans. And I guess the taxpayers could see like, okay, we're getting taxed now because the money got injected to pay for the student loans. I guess this also comes back to the fact that there's always going to be a segment of the population that is favored when money gets injected.
Yeah. I mean, I think she also sort of, I mean, even though they're saying they're using taxes to curb inflation, by her own, I mean, I heard on a couple of debates, Mosler said that there should be no inflation, but also then in their own analogies, they talk about how they're injecting money into the system, which by definition is inflation, because you do increase the money supply.
But I don't think just because you increase the money supply doesn't mean you would absolutely have inflation, though. I don't think, because if you did increase the goods that are like if you had like if your population is
Okay,
growing,
I see what you're saying. Oh,
um,
okay, so you're saying that the goal is if you can increase the goods and services produced faster than the money supply, you then would not have inflation.
right.
Okay.
Um, and
So okay, so part I guess yeah, I sort of remembered having that thought. So the goal is to increase, I guess the out the out the out the output of the country faster than you increase the money supply.
mhm. Yeah, it's just
But that's obviously not possible forever.
it also just seems yeah, just I don't know. It just the whole MMT kind of all this just like paying people for certain things. It's like it. I mean, it's not natural. The whole idea of capitalism is that it's like a natural force and it can be like ugly at times, but the money's getting allocated based on basically well selfish people or working in their self-interest, so everyone's kind of operating how they would naturally, not like some outside force is coming in. Now, what did you think about the idea of, and I forgot what they actually call it, but like always having like a government job? Like, so instead of having like unemployment benefits, there would always be a backdrop where you could get I guess, a government job, basically.
Yeah,
You,
her proposal was a I think they called it a transition job, I believe. But the job she described was a good job with, I think she listed it as a $15 an hour wage with benefits, PTO, maternity leave, insurance, blah, blah, blah. And that would be a job that, the majority of the population right now would probably quit, not the majority, but a sizable percentage of America would quit their job to take. Uh, I think it's
right. That
to
my
be
thought
frank,
was,
it's a
uh-huh.
terrible idea. Like you're going to, it more or less seemed like she wanted to sequester people from the private sector into government jobs to have them do some undefined thing that she doesn't say, but all that she says is work in communities doing God knows what. There's really, I feel like there would be no accountability. I mean, if you're gonna say I get all those things and $15 an hour and I can go sit on a tree stump and twiddle my thumbs for 8 hours a day, I mean, probably not gonna do it right now, but in 10 years, if I got fed up with working, I'll just go do that and take a government pension. I think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I
You're
think
going
it.
to be fighting with, you're going to reduce the real output of the country. And then I think you would sort of misallocate the true labor resources of the country. But okay, your thoughts.
Yeah, you're definitely competing against the private sector. But I did. Well, okay. Here's a question for you: are you in favor of like the current unemployment, the way
No,
it's set up?
well,
You're
I don't
not.
know. Okay, so I would be in favor of. I've never been, I guess, on unemployment. I was very against the COVID unemployment, which was like I don't remember what it was. It was like $600, the federal $600 a week plus whatever your state unemployment is. Uh, I think if you've been working for a while, you should get, what was it, 6 months?
I thought it was. I don't know. So I had unemployment like the end of I think 2016 or early 2017. I think I only had it for like a month or two. And I was actually kind of embarrassed to even sign up for it because I was trying to go without it. And then I'm like, well, why am I being stupid? Like I paid into this. Like I'm gonna just go file and get the money for it. And it's like nothing. Like I could not have survived on that. So it was lucky I had saved money. But I guess if you really needed to buckle down, I suppose you could survive on that. But yeah, I mean, you need there needs to be some incentive to go back to work or try to do
Right.
do something. So, but I kind of understand the anxiety with not having a job, or like if you actually wanted a job. Because like after like 3 months being unemployed, I did kind of start feeling a little antsy, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, um, so maybe having interactions with people would have helped a little. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of the jobs that she's proposing are like in parks and yeah, just working on the cities and
I mean, I think the problem is that it's like undefined. Like it's so easy to put that on paper and be like, this is a great idea. Like we can help all these people do all these things. But at the end, like, one, the people have to be accountable for the work they're doing. Uh, and
right.
two, like if you can't fire someone, or if they can just, there has to be some type of, there has to be some type of disciplinary action if you're, a bad worker. Otherwise, what's the incentive of doing anything?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like, I
agree.
mean, some,
And the difference on this one was even if you quit your job, you could sign up for this. Whereas normal unemployment, like if you just quit your job, you're not entitled to unemployment. You have to be let go.
but okay, yeah.
Um,
Um, so
you want to talk about
let me read some of my talking
okay.
points. Oh, well, I guess the other thing about I don't have the page number written down, but she at one point mentioned that the jobs program would decrease inflation. And I just thought that was I thought that was absolutely incorrect. I thought if anything, it would cause inflation. I guess what were your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
You're talking about the for unemployed people or people that quit?
Yeah, or just people that are unemployed. She wrote in the book that that would cause a decrease in inflation. I felt like that would certainly, at least the way she was describing it with the pay scale, that would cause inflation. I also thought it would cause a lot of businesses to go out of business.
I did have one thought that could be um well, a slightly good consequence. So I think she brings up the idea that, and I think this is more so an American phenomenon, that the CEOs of a lot of companies are such crazy multiples of some of the other employees. Like I know in Japan, there's some like unspoken rule that like, the CEO doesn't make, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say like 20 times, 30 times, but like in America, there's some CEOs making 300 times, 400 times some of the amounts that their employees make. And that maybe that there would be, where am I going with this? That there might be some, I guess, um, convergence in that sense. If, or I guess, man, I don't know where I'm going now.
Well,
um,
are you sort of trying to tie this into inequality, like income inequality?
kind of. I thought maybe the ways companies would allocate the money and how much like CEOs would be paid compared to the other employees might get shifted a little bit because of some of these policies. But once again, it's not really, it's still like forced. And whether it's good or not, don't really know. Okay, one thing I did find that was interesting, they talk about Social Security and Medicare a lot. And one thing that, or one question that was like, how are we going to pay for this? And I think it was, is it FDR? Yeah. So FDR established Social Security in 1935. And he set up special rules about how it would be paid for, and to like reinforce the idea that we were actually like paying for it. Like you can see it like in your pay stub. Like, yeah, that money's going towards funding Social Security. And but they're talking about like there's no need to really I guess account for that, because under MMT, like it's fine, like Congress can change the rule and they'll be able to cover any promises they make, even if like the purchasing power goes to like zilch, they'll still be able to cover it. And yeah, it kind of just reinforces this like deficit type of thinking. So I thought that one was kind of interesting. And I guess there's something actually in a bill that says like how much the deficit can get to.
Well,
I
I
don't.
guess I don't stay up with politics enough, but it seems like that has changed. There's a deficit. I believe there's a deficit ceiling that we as a country can make, that like every X amount of years, Congress just passes a new bill that pushes the deficit ceiling higher.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, what's the point? I guess it would be interesting to talk about. So maybe I think we've previously talked about, just to sort of segue out of this and then maybe come back into it later. But what we had, so I feel like they are kind of describing what type of environment we're currently in. Like this is how the government currently works, right? Would you say
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, that's how it's, especially after all the spending in COVID.
Right.
That's when people really started questioning, well, why do I even pay taxes if they're just printing
Just
whatever
printing
they feel
money,
like?
right? Which I mean, I feel like that too. It's like what is the purpose? I mean, at one point in the book, she says the purpose of MMT is not to be Robin Hood, to take from the rich and give to the poor. But then in almost the same paragraph, she talks about how the rich just have too much and they need to sort of like redistribute. That's when I felt like it became very, sort of like what you said in your intro, very communistic, when they're talking about like sort of spreading out inequalities, uh, more or less to make, I guess, everyone the same. But sort of before we were doing this, I guess if you go a long, long time ago when we were on the gold standard, maybe you want to elaborate on more or less how the government worked at that point and why you think we shifted off of this.
Well, I think they operated like what she's calling a currency user. Basically, think of your household budget. You earn money through a job, working productively in some way. You get paid for that work, and then that money goes into a pool in which you can use to pay for your expenses. And that's how the government was thought to have worked, just like a household budget.
So then for the government, that was everything was paid for with tax tariffs and borrowing money.
Yes.
Because you got
And because it was, because they had a kind of a structure and limits, because those dollars were redeemable for gold. So that's how it was.
so I think it's important to note. I was having this talk at work that and I was listening to either her or Mosler debate or just speak, I think some people just fundamentally think the point of government is different. Uh, so I
Yeah,
guess,
because in Mosler's example, he's kind of depicting that, his kids work for him basically.
right.
Whereas I think most people say, like, yo, the government works for us. Like, we're paying
Yeah.
you to do what we want to be done in, our communities and in our country. Like, it's not us working for you, you are working for us.
And this is where I feel like it becomes really like central plannerish, where more or less they're dictating what they want done in the country. And then more or less, and if you listen to Mosler talk, he talks about coercion through the government a lot. Like he uses those terms, like you are coerced. I mean, he uses terms of like people having to pay taxes or, guns being held at you. Like that type of verbiage is used that where you're being forced to do things. But uh, so I guess what I would say is like some people feel like the government has the best interest of the citizens in hand and they want the government to dictate what is done. I personally feel the opposite. So like that's why I understand like why at times like gold standard doesn't work or some type of fixed standard does not work. But the benefits of it, which when I was listening to Stephanie Kelton talk today, uh, a gold standard sort of handicaps any type of fixed commodity government handicaps the government and what it can do. And in many regards, I think that's a good thing. But she obviously disagreed. I guess what are your
I
thoughts
mean, I
on
guess
that?
I think, well, I guess when would be the time where we would want to go off? Like, I guess
Well,
if
in a time of war, you almost
uh-huh.
indefinitely have
But
to go off of it.
but I guess then the question is that a good thing? Like, is it because then the government's basically not taking the citizens or the restrictions into account? Or would you say we should be able to do that so we can go to war? Or would you say we shouldn't go to war because we should be, I guess, restricted in that way?
Well, I would say, different wars bring up different things. I would say if someone's knocking on, trying to invade us, knocking on our door, then we should, do all that we can to resist. If we're fighting a war abroad, I think there's more leeway in what we're doing. Right? I don't know if you would agree with that. I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. And I actually agree. Like, I think it makes the decision harder. Like, you have to, the good thing about a goal, like a standard, is that you have to properly allocate how you're using your money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
and if you're not allocating your money correctly, there will be consequences. Uh,
Yeah.
So just like everyone else, if you make malinvestment, you have to face the consequences. The government is beholden to the people. If the government makes bad decisions, the people in charge should be filtered out. Just the other, I don't know. I just thought of this. Another point that she made throughout the book was that every time the government went through a surplus, so instead of being in a deficit, she talked about how we had a depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she talked about that in the book. I hear her talk about that a lot in her speeches.
Well,
So
she talks a
she,
lot about, when they say fiscal deficit, someone's or the government's deficit is good for someone in the economy, but that someone is not everyone. And then she does go on to acknowledge, the benefits of Uncle Sam's deficits aren't spread widely throughout the economy. Um but it yeah, Yeah, the government's deficit is good for someone.
Right. So like isn't the reverse so when a government has a surplus, so you're pulling money out of the, I guess, out of the economy. I mean, I hear Schiff say this all the time, like the boom in more or less the boom and bust cycles, the recessions, the recessions and then the booms. It is the recession that is the cure for malinvestment. So when you have the recession, bad businesses go bankrupt and then the good businesses become stronger. And when you have a boom, it's when money becomes cheap, money floods into the system, and you have a lot of new creation. And when money's cheap, you can have these businesses that shouldn't survive continue to go on. But when money becomes tight is when you have the recession, when those poorly run businesses go under. I guess. But that's what she's referring to as a recession or depression, but you could also just view it as like a culling of businesses that should not be in operation, where you can then reallocate those resources to better businesses or better people.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you definitely can see like when interest rates keep going down, a lot of companies can just refinance their debt and stay around for longer. And then, but as as we're now seeing, as interest rates are going up and some of those debts are becoming due, then they have to refinance or pay them off. And if you can't pay it off, you got to refinance. And if it's at a higher rate, then that might strain your company and you might go on, you might go under. So yeah, there's definitely some zombie companies that were sticking around from the low rates and just being able to refinance at lower rates. You want to go through what she considers like the deficits that matter?
Sure. It's
Because I
chapter
think
7.
because I think these are things that we've actually talked about on a lot of our episodes, and they do not involve government intervention. So I think this will be interesting. Um, so I don't know if there's one you want to discuss first. I mean, we could do like the
Why,
help.
why, why don't we
Mhm.
just list out all the ones that she
Okay.
lists, and then we can talk about it. So the first one she lists is the good jobs deficit. Um, she follows that by the savings deficit,
Yeah.
the healthcare deficit, the education deficit, the infrastructure deficit, the climate deficit, and then finally she ends with the I believe it's the democracy deficit. Yeah.
Mhm.
What do I say? That's the last one, right? The democracy deficit.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Was there any one of those that particularly stuck out to you?
Um, well, I mean, I don't know if really standing out, but like the healthcare deficit, for example. I mean, I guess I'd be curious, and I know we've discussed this, like patents on drugs, and if that could be something that potentially could lower costs for everyone. And then we also on episode 21, we discussed a lot of options with Marshall Allen on his book Never Pay the First Bill, where he discussed way you can go about getting cheaper services or even taking certain healthcare providers to small claims court if you feel like you've been price gouged. And he gives a lot of resources on rates and they're trying to pave the way for more transparency.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm all for transparency. I don't think reducing, you know, I, I don't think reducing patents is going to make uh, drugs more affordable. I think it's more of an insurance issue. Uh,
well,
I
here's a
personally,
question. Like I guess why don't we have so like when Uber came out, I mean, didn't Lyft like couldn't someone basically copy their idea and do the same thing essentially? Like they didn't get like a moat of protection around their idea. I guess I'm confused why these patents or these types of protections are in medicines and not other sectors.
Because the amount of resources needed to build the good is astronomically higher. I mean, to get a drug to market costs, I mean, probably close. I don't have the exact number. At a minimum, $1 billion, probably.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it cost $1 billion to make a Uber app.
Well, I don't know. Like, but what about like some, I don't know, like I mean there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of things that took incredible amounts of time and money with no certainty it was going to work, and then it
Sure,
worked,
sure,
and
sure.
they're not protected necessarily.
Right, but there's a ton of pharmaceuticals that take up a ton of, time and money, and they don't work. Let me ask you this question. Why does all the medical innovation, almost not all, but almost all the medical innovation in the world happen in America?
Probably because they protect the drugs.
Okay, so don't you think that should say something? Like,
Well, I guess I'm just posing the question: if you took it off, what do you think would happen?
I don't,
Or is it an FDA issue, or is it
I think it's partially both. I mean, the
like
regulations are, it is hard to even apply to the FDA. To file a application with the FDA, I believe costs $1 million.
okay?
Don't quote me on that number, but it is a lot of money. Uh,
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, you know, it costs so much to make a drug. If someone gets a drug approved, I could, depending on the type of drug, if I got my hands on it within probably 3 months, I could tell you what it was. And once you know what it is, it's not hard to manufacture. I mean, theoretically, it wouldn't be, I mean, it potentially could be, but it most likely would not be that hard to manufacture.
Mm.
So someone
Yeah,
else
it's
could
just
be up and running for, 100,000th of the cost. I mean, I don't know.
uh,
I'm just
I,
saying, like, all I'm saying is people always complain about how much more drugs cost in America than the rest of the world. I more or less always just point out the fact that almost all of the drug companies and drugs are made or developed in the United States. And there's a reason for that. I'm not
mhm,
saying it's because of parents. I'm not saying it's because of our healthcare system. I'm just saying that those are the facts.
uh-huh. Well, do you think there should be patents around other things other than medicine then?
There are pants around other things other than medicine.
But like, I guess
There are pants around everything. I mean, what about our cousin? He has pants on his technologies.
yeah.
And I don't think those go off pan protection. So how is it any different?
So you are, I don't know. Part of me is just like not, I think if you were really to look at like a dog eat dog capitalistic society, you wouldn't have those. I guess that's kind of where I'm like my mind goes to. And if the innovation really was, well, I guess I mean, yeah, I don't know. I go
So I
back and
guess
forth on this.
if you could just start like selling whatever you want to cure whatever you want, uh, maybe I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying like the investment into drugs is a lot.
Uh-huh.
If
But I guess then what would you say to someone that says, because insulin was
yeah,
not made, or was it made in America? Or is it? It's not patent protected though, is it?
the insulin thing, I'm not well. I don't really know what's
Because
going on with that.
because the way I've kind of read it is it's that all the money is made in here because they are kind of shielded, and then they kind of just get whatever they can get elsewhere.
That's correct.
So,
Yes.
so like everyone else outside of America is benefiting
Yes, I
from.
agree. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Uh,
So,
The rest of the
but
world benefits from us, but if we did not exist, I don't think that they would be way worse off.
okay, that's yeah, that's a tough.
I guess what I'm saying is if the United States did not operate medically like how it does, the rest of the world would have to change how it operates.
Mhm. Hmm,
Because I
okay,
don't think really anyone would be pushing innovation in the medical field, or at least in like the drug field. Like I'm
okay.
not saying like I think probably a lot of drugs are overpriced. I mean, some of these things are ridiculous. Like the medical bills, I also agree, a lot of times seem ridiculous to me. And I think the issue is mainly when we were talking on never pay the first bill, I think the issue is mainly how the insurance structures are. Um, I'm not totally against the one payer system. I don't really like the system we have, but
But
I
wouldn't
would
the one payer system get rid of the innovation then?
I don't necessarily think so. Not as long as the people that are doing the innovation are getting paid. I would personally prefer that the healthcare system is set up more like my car insurance. Like I've never really understood that. Uh,
You mean how it's not linked through your job?
yeah, and like why am I, why is it just healthcare that's paid through your job? I feel like,
That's a good point.
none of the prices are known. Sort of like what we're talking about. None of the prices are known. I don't understand why I as an individual cannot go out to different insurance companies, you know,
Well,
and have it
you
set
could,
up.
you can,
Well, right. Okay, true.
but it's become so commonplace that it's through your job.
It
Um,
seems like it all gets jacked up because everyone operates it through their job. And then you
what
get these.
I think, well, I guess I'd have
I
to,
mean, that's more of a you field than a me field.
yeah, but I don't think I mean, what we were reading with Marshall Allen, it wasn't really the lack of transparency from the insurer. It was what is the price that
Price. Yeah.
the provider is charging. That is like the stumbling block kind of. And for whatever reason,
But isn't that sort of muddled because of like how they're billing the insurance? Like, don't a lot of times I just went in for I just went in 'cause I had something with my eye, and I got a full regular checkup for some reason.
you mean they charged you for a full checkup?
No,
Or
they just gave me a full regular checkup. It's like, why?
was this an eye doctor or a normal doctor?
No, it's just I went into a Ready Med. They took
Okay.
my insurance. I'm guessing that they wrote me up so they could charge the insurance company. I mean, I have no idea. It's all speculation, but
Okay.
that's my.
Okay. Well, let's yeah, it's definitely polarizing and interesting topic, but why don't we go to education? Because this one, I found I was chuckling quite a bit. And on episode, let's see, 24, we spoke with Jason Brown on his book, It Is Possible. And that book is about how he went and got a couple college degrees with no student loan debt. Um, and she's kind of saying, like, just, push money to all the student loan debt and forgive it all. I guess what were your initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts are I don't know if we talked about this on the show. I'm very much against student loan forgiveness. Uh, I think it's sort of, I just disagree with it. I mean, I get what she's saying, but I think she's sort of missing the point that a lot of the reason that colleges have become so much more expensive is because of the government. Uh, when governments, I mean, you can go back and look at it when I don't remember, it was in the 60s, whoever it was passed the bill that, allowed all students, if you wanted to go to college, to get a loan. That created a artificially high supply, and you can chart the increase in college tuition directly from that. So I don't think this is just, in my opinion, what she's proposing is just another example of someone in government creating a problem, someone then coming pandering to the part of the society that they created the problem for, and then telling them that they have the solution. I don't think the debt should be wiped out. I mean, why don't you just wipe out? Why don't you just? I mean, she talks about how if you wipe out, these people can't start, like these students with these burden of debt can't start families, buy homes, and that grows the economy. Why don't you wipe out all mortgage debt? I'm sure you would like that, right? I
I
would like
would.
it. Yeah, I would love it. That would also grow the economy if I could direct all of my mortgage, the money I pay towards my mortgages, into, as your wife would say, being a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So what are your thoughts on it?
No, exactly. It's funny that she's talking about the government plugging this like $1.6 trillion hole, and it was all because of the government that it happened. And yeah, these people, if people see that, people are struggling to start families or struggling to perform in their lives, then yeah, less people should go to college. And that's the solution. It's not forgive the debt.
Right. The solution. I mean,
and then education would come down for everyone.
right. She kind of goes in earlier. She kind of goes into it that I mean, she draws all of these false equivalencies, trying to make it sound like there's some sexist and racial disparities in the country, saying by who makes more and whatever, that I think if you really looked at, could kind of be debunked with, I mean, to be fair, I did not go through and do this, but I have a feeling that if, like, to say that men and women make different amounts when you're not I mean, just off the top of my head, I know that there's a higher average of men that would major in, STEM fields than women. That would probably cause, with doing no other research, that would probably cause men on average to make more. I'm just saying that. I think that is a truth. That started really ruffling my feathers, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of jobs that are kind of cater to one sex or the other. I mean, I'm sure the female models make more. Sure, there's a
Right, the
lot
male
of
models.
yeah, there's a lot of jobs where just the inherent abilities of a woman are probably better and they probably get paid more. So
I had something else to say about the education one. I'm sort of blanking on it. So what did you think? I guess what did you think about the infrastructure deficit?
um, I mean, I didn't write down a whole lot for this one, but I remember I don't know what the agency is that rates or ranks countries by their infrastructure, but the U.S. got a pretty poor score. And I think people can see that, and I think I notice it more when I go back to Michigan, with the potholes. Um, but I think that's weather related. But yeah, I mean, do I think the roads need like a facelift? Yeah, I mean, probably, but I don't know the best way to go about it. And actually, I mean, one thing that happened recently where we grew up by Bay City, Michigan, is it sounds like two of the bridges are getting sold to private companies that are going to now charge a toll. Because
Really?
I think the city was having trouble maintaining the bridges because the drawbridges went up a couple times and they got stalled or stuck, and there were some issues with the traffic. So I think they sold them to private companies, and now there's going to be, I think like kind of like that elevator in Brazil we took. I don't know if you remember that, but they charged like 15 cents to use this elevator to get from like the top of this hill to the bottom.
I don't remember that. Where
Yeah.
were we? When?
Salvador.
Huh? I don't remember that at
So
all.
that was like a private type of infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of private roads too that charge a toll, and you know, I I could see that happening, or more private people going in and kind of repairing it. I don't know. It just depends on what type of road, what type of bridge, and I guess I wasn't like I didn't have strong thoughts on that. Um,
So
that deficits.
I would say, well, also not to mention, she talked about dams. There was the Midland Dam that broke, I think, like 2 years ago.
That's true.
Um, I would say of all the deficits she mentions, the infrastructure deficit or the infrastructure is the one thing I think the government should actually take care of.
Okay.
Um,
Is that
and
just
that's
because the roads go between the states,
well, I
basically?
mean, that's one reason. I just think the initial capital investment to build infrastructure is so high. I don't really think any private enterprise is going to go in to do it.
Mhm. Well, then I mean, cities can issue bonds too. I mean, they can do that. Like a
Yeah,
lot of times they'll have like an infrastructure bond that a city, we're gonna, take this money and repave the roads, build another bridge, zippy zippy. Um,
I mean, with
I will
I,
say, like when I went to like Japan, I remember thinking like our infrastructure seems so outdated compared to theirs. I will say that. So I definitely think we need like a facelift. I just um
okay.
I don't know how to.
I mean, yeah. I guess with that said, she talks about. I mean, she talks about all these renters that can't afford their rent, and I don't know. I mean, like whenever I hear that, I mean, in my mind, the thing I'm thinking is like no one's forcing them to live there. Like you have the freedom to move.
Mhm.
I understand that it's hard. Like it's hard to move. It sucks to move, but if you can't afford to live somewhere, you should, either get roommates, live somewhere cheaper. Uh, I mean, there are things you can do. Like I feel like it's just like we act like everyone's entitled to like a luxury apartment, and not it's luxury by definition. Not everyone can afford it. Like, um,
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and I mean, she was also talking about certain towns and cities that basically lost a lot of jobs, particular the automotive industry and the unions, and she's kind of painting this grim picture on how these people like have lost everything, um and yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad, but yeah, maybe that you just need to move and find a better opportunity. I know it like sucks, but that's that's how it
I
goes, I
mean, that is the American way
guess.
is to
That,
move, to go
exactly.
somewhere where you can, succeed. It's not to just stay like that is literally what I mean, most of the ancestors of the immigrants did. Like they came here and they succeeded.
Yeah, and if there's no opportunity, you move. I mean, we both moved. I mean,
right.
maybe for different reasons, but
I mean,
um
I left Nashville. I loved living in Nashville, but there were no really good opportunities for me in Nashville with my degree. So I left. I didn't want to leave. Uh, but right. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same, more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
It was hard to leave. I left all my friends. I had been there for close to 10 years. Uh,
So I
yeah,
guess I would say I've only heard Stephanie speak once. And I actually couldn't really see that she thought so highly of like the climate issue, like from the book. But like when you hear her speak, it sounds like she puts that as like number one priority.
yeah,
I don't know if you would agree on the
I
ones
agree.
you've heard.
Yeah.
So I guess what do you think about the climate deficit, Mr. Science?
I mean, you know, I don't go read um literature like climate literature on a daily basis. If you're going to say like, do I think humans are causing the climate to change? Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we are. Do I think, from the way she writes and talks to the way some of these other climate activists write and talk, do I think by 2050 or 2040 or whatever, if we're still using fossil fuels, do I think the world's going to end? No, I don't. I think humans will adapt. I think we'll develop new technology. I don't think the answer is to force everyone to go off fossil fuels immediately and to adapt some of these more renewable energies that, I mean, isn't that what's going on with Germany? Like, didn't Germany just
Yeah.
suspend all fossil, like, I mean, there was issues and I think it was like maybe Thailand, where they were saying that they couldn't use fertilizer because fertilizer was bad for the environment, and then the people couldn't eat, they couldn't grow enough food. Like, I don't think, these radical changes are beneficial. They cause a lot of problems in the short term. I think the best thing to do is essentially the capitalistic way, is to get everyone, the developing countries, to make them developed, to get them out of poverty so people start caring about the environment more, to get the current technology that people are using up to speed, better cars that are more fuel efficient, they have less, their exhaust is better, and I think that will help. um, I don't think the entire country should overnight flip to electric cars. Um, I don't think the infrastructure is there yet. I think that will cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, not really. I mean, the extreme weather, now that I have a condo near the ocean, I'm a little more concerned, like on like storms, I guess. But other than that, I don't really. I'm not losing sleep about the climate really at night, but maybe I should. But I also find it kind of like there's a lot of people that really I think it's like fear mongering, but they're still, flying planes. They're still doing all this
Yeah,
stuff.
they're hypocrites.
And like, actually, I think I read, what about just eliminating meat from your diet? If everyone did that, wouldn't there be like a huge savings? Or am I totally getting that wrong?
No, I think you're right. I think that's one of the big vegan talking points is if you got rid of cattle farming, carbon emissions would really drop. You'd also reclaim a lot of land. Everyone, you'd be able to feed everyone. I mean, that documentary Game Changers goes over it. I remember.
Okay.
I'll tell you this funny anecdote. I was back when I was living in Nashville. I was sitting in a sauna at the YMCA, and I started talking to this guy. Um, he went to Michigan as well. He did a master's in music, and we're talking, and he more or less just goes, it's just like the world just becomes so depressing. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm pretty happy. I'm sitting, it's like a Wednesday at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm sitting in a sauna. I'm like, yeah, the world's pretty good. I go, why is it so depressing? And he more or less said, like the climate, there's war, there's famine, like the climate's destroying. Probably like by 2040, like, the world will be destroyed. And I'm like, man, like it just got awkward. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, well, I don't know, man. Like I don't think you should live like that. Otherwise, like, what's the point of getting up in the morning? Just go dig a hole and sit in it and wait to die.
Yeah,
Uh, but maybe we'll just die off by 2040.
I
Uh,
don't know. I don't know. Well, do you have any last thoughts on this book?
well, the last deficit she mentions, the democracy deficit, that's the one where I felt like she becomes like full blown comrade in talking about all the inequality and how it's more or less unfair. And I think that's the one where, in the same sentence, she says MMT is not about being Robin Hood, but how rich people just have too much money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, well, where would democracy be good? I mean, that's what I want to know. Like, if we need to go somewhere, where are we going? I just heard what's his name, Max Kaiser. He's that Bitcoin maximalist.
uh,
He's in Bitcoin Beach in Salvador or
okay,
El Salvador. He speaks pretty highly of it, and he was getting questioned pretty hard about the idea of moving after hundreds of years of your family ancestors living in one place. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, the American way like used to be one way and now it's not, and the way it used to be is more like how I see it here in El Salvador. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I never really, I mean, I knew El Salvador had been adopting more of a Bitcoin standard, but I guess I never really actually thought of it as a actual place I would move to. But I don't know where are we going if we're leaving America.
I mean, I don't know. That's the problem. That's the old. That's the old sort of the Cuban immigrant problem when I was listening to this Cuban immigrant speak on the news, and he goes, "Well, at least I was able to come here. If socialism and communism takes hold here, like where are you going?" Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess my first stop would probably be honestly Israel, just because I know they take me. But
And they have good falafel, really good falafel.
I've been told they have the best falafel. I liked
You,
it. It, it
you,
was
you
it
didn't
was
you didn't
more
have oh you did have falafel there.
it was more or less the I was introduced to falafel there.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't know. I used to just say like Canada because they speak English, but I don't know if I would go to Canada. Um, Ideally, I would just like to own an island and go live there.
Uh-huh.
So I could Atlas shrugged it and just build a little society on my own and have everyone voluntarily live there.
I saw the smallest countries, like have you seen that? Like it's like I think like built in the ocean, like on a um it looked like a shipping container that's elevated up into the ocean. I think it's called like Sea Land or something.
I've never heard of this.
I'll have to I'll put it in the show notes if people are curious once I find it.
Okay.
Um yeah, I think it's this Principality of Sealand. There we go.
Hmm.
Population 27. So there
Okay.
we go. So um do you have like favorite quote or
I didn't really I didn't really write down a favorite quote. It was an interest. I enjoyed it. It was an interesting read. I think it's good to read things you don't agree with an open mind. I did try to read this with an open mind. I found myself at times trying to like just punch holes through her arguments, and then I kept wanting to stop myself from doing that and to just take her arguments at face value.
I mean, I kind of, I really like the book. Well, I thought she did a good job in it. To me, it seems like this is how it is being operated.
Yeah,
So I was
right.
actually more surprised to hear of people in Congress trying to get a like deficit neutral bill proposed.
Yeah, but that
Um,
that she's talking about that close to 10 years ago or 6 years, 7 years ago.
was it that far? Okay, but I mean, I guess that part surprised me more than the MMT part. It was like that the other people didn't seem to be on board with that's how it was being operated. That was more surprising to me than the actual MMT part because I mean, yeah, that's how they've been operating. I mean, they can print the cash. And I thought it was funny the intro. I mean, I love this quote, and I think other people have been quoted as saying it, but it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
I mean,
And she
well, I
was,
think she credits Mark Twain with that, right?
yeah,
Yeah, but that's
um,
more or less the Noggle quote that you always say too.
right, yeah, yeah. Um, and she's using it as basically that MMT is the correct way. So I don't know.
Well, I think it's the current way. I
Yeah,
guess time, like I said, I think it's a great way to abuse being the reserve currency. I don't think it's sustainable in the long term. Uh, but on the same note, I don't think any fiat is really sustainable in the long term. Um,
yeah.
but I guess, hopefully that's not a problem for us, but
Just
probably
just
for our spawn.
just gotta keep buying Bitcoin and gold. More Bitcoin.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, I
So,
guess with that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Allwile, and with me, as always, is Jack Allwile. Jack, it's been a pleasure. I think it was a good episode. It was a pretty long episode.
long. Hopefully, I'm still a little foggy in my mind. Hopefully, I wasn't rambling or going off too much. But yeah, I
I don't
thought it was a
feel.
good discussion and solid pick on your part. And
What are we
I thought
doing next?
we are doing the art, or wait, the lessons of history by Ariel and I think it's William
Well,
Durant.
yeah.
So that will be next week, and then we'll have our book draft after that. So hard to believe we've done through another season, and I look forward to challenging our beliefs in the next set of books.
Have you already started to take jot down what you're picking?
Absolutely.
Okay. You're a little ahead of me. I haven't really picked anything yet.
Yeah.
So I'm a little slagging a little bit. All right, Jack. Well, it's been a pleasure. Well, I'll probably talk to you tomorrow, I guess.
Yep.
All right.
Take it easy.